Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about support itemization with specific emphasis on enchanters. So if you want to skip around the video, you can find timestamps in the description. You can also access this Google Doc in the description as well. So of course I'd love everybody to watch the whole thing, but I know that sometimes people may not have time, so that's why I give you the timestamps in the Google Docs. Be sure to check that out. Okay, and special thanks to Christopher for the very generous donation to support this video. I really appreciate it. And Christopher has also donated for a tank itemization video and a AP itemization video. Now I'm going to wait definitely until the next patch for the AP itemization, which should be in about 4 days, 8.4. And I'll see if I can do the tank one here. It might be around the same time. I have a lot of professional obligations with school over the next few days, but I'll get those out as soon as I can, and I'll have all the, the AP stuff as soon as it comes out, because I know a lot of people have been asking about that, and they're really curious with all the AP item changes, like what does that mean for, AP supports like Brand, Zyra, so on and so forth. So I'll definitely have a video out there for that soon. And yeah, thanks again, Chris. I appreciate it. All right. So, what is an enchanter? Well, it starts to get a little murky, so I know people say, but there's this enchanter and that enchanter, this champion isn't really an enchanter, they're a tank, and, Riot, especially with kind of the newer champions like Rakan and the Taric remake, have tried to create sort of hybrid champions to some extent that aren't just sort of the classic enchanters like Janna, Lulu, Sona, but it's really hard to fit them into a very specific box, and so... really how I'm trying to define enchanters are champions that scale very well with the plus healing and shielding stat and tend to have really low base stats and very low tank scaling. So they're going to be champions that have, in general, relatively low HP per level. They're not going to have a lot of armor per level. And that means they're going to scale best with the plus healing and shielding. And they don't have a lot of... a ton of damage is not their ideal optimization, right? And so they wouldn't be the kind of champion that you would want to stack like a Leandri's, Sorcerer Boots, Void Staff, stuff like that. So people that don't have really high base damages in terms of AP, and people who don't have very strong tank scaling. So their signature is often that they have a very good plus heal or shield. Okay, and so enchanters are typically best when you want to pick an enchanter. That's typically best when your team already has a lot of damage, so you don't need a support that does damage. And when you have a hyper carry, AD carry, typically it could be other champions too, that would benefit very well from plus healing and shielding. Now there are other comps too, like Soraka, for example, really likes having tanks on her team because she has such consistent healing that scales very well with the armor and magic resist that tanks are going to have. And she doesn't have a lot of peel. So some enchanters have a lot of peel, like Janna. Other enchanters don't have a lot of peel, but have a ton of sustained healing, like Soraka. So this is a very, very loose categorization, but that's just in general, this is basically the deal. If your team already has enough damage. Another thing is engage. Not a lot of enchanters have engage outside of Rakan. So, if your team has solid engage like a Sejuani, an enchanter becomes a better option because you won't need engage from the support role. But if you have a bunch of squishy champions on your team, you have a Kayn jungle, a Riven top, and a Diana middle or something, and very few people have a good option for starting a fight, you could go with Rakan from the enchanters, or you may want to also go with the tank that can engage like Alistar. Okay, this is all very loose, but this is what I'm kind of talking about when I'm talking about enchanters, these basic types of champions. So a lot of the popular enchanters as of 8.3, and there are others out there. These are just kind of the most 8 populars, like Janna, Taric. Now Taric's obviously a bit different because he is sort of a tanky hybrid. He does have really high base stats, really high base armor. He doesn't scale as well with plus healing and shielding as he kind of does. It's slower and more steady over time. As he lands more auto attacks, he gets to use his Q more. Okay, so Taric's kind of a special exception there. So is Rakan, in that he can engage. He does scale very well with plus healing and shielding. He does have really low base stats, but Taric and Rakan have different itemization paths than what I'm going to talk about down here. So I do have a guide for Season 8 with Taric and with Rakan, so be sure to check that out if you want to know their specific itemization options. Because they are hybrid types of champions, and they have a lot more viable build paths than some of the other champions we're going to talk about here. Okay, and then you've got your Sona, your Lulu, Soraka, Nami, sort of classic enchanters. And then Bard, sort of. He does a lot of damage early on, and he has some pretty decent damage scaling if he gets enough meeps. So Bard's kind of an odd duck there. Once again, he's a newer champion. They tried to make him sort of a hybrid. So he's kind of an enchanter, you know. He doesn't have a lot of buffs and debuffs, but he does have a slow, you know, on his auto. Does have a slow aura stun with his Q. He has his ult. So Bard's kind of an odd duck, but he's often built like an enchanter in terms of, like, he'll get Redemption Locket and those types of items. Although, once again, he has a variety of build paths as well. You know, some people get, like, Iceborne Gauntlet or Frozen Heart. They try to go tanky Bard. So Bard is sort of an odd duck. But, you know, people would probably, if you had to force people to say, is he an AP champion, a tank champion, or an enchanter, most people would probably describe him as an enchanter with some AP tendencies. Okay, so that's what we're basically going to be talking about in this video, these types of champions. Okay, so the relative strength of heal and shields. So this is something that a lot of people don't really realize or respect, just how good healing and shielding is. It's very, very good. And the reason for this is the way that it scales with resistances. And I'm going to have another video all about scaling that I don't remember. I think it was Christoph, another donator, donated for that one. So I'll have that coming up soon. But the way resistances work, if you've never looked it up, and you can look this up on Google if you want, and it'll break it down mathematically for you with all this stuff. But the easiest way to think about it is that you do 100 divided by the amount of armor that you do 100 divided by 100 plus the amount of armor that somebody has, and that's their total resistances. So if someone has, let's say 50 armor, you would do 100 divided by 150 equals 66%. So that means you would only take 66.6% of the damage that you would normally take if you had 0 armor. So if you have 0 armor, 100 divided by 100 is 1. So you take 100% of the damage you would take. So in that other scenario, you would be blocking, you know, about 33% of the damage with 50 armor. So that's how it works mathematically. Okay, and magic resist is the exact same formulation. All right, and I've talked about this in past videos, and I'll talk about this especially with the AP itemization video where you have like spell penetration and things like that that can modify that number, and then percentage penetration like Void Staff. I have talked about that in the past with AP itemization, but I'll do more of that in the new video. Okay, so what does this mean? Why is this important for enchanters? Okay, well, let's say that you're trying to deal damage. All right, let's say you're dealing 100 magic damage to somebody, and they have 100 magic resist. Ultimately, instead of doing 100 damage, you're actually only going to do 50 damage. Okay, because we do 100 plus 100. That's 200, and then you do 100 divided by 200. It's 0.5, so you're only taking 50% of the damage. 0.5 times 100 is 50. So for someone who has 100 magic resist, it's going to reduce 50% of the damage, and you're only going to do a total of 50 magic damage, okay? Now, a shield, however, if you put a shield on somebody, and the same works with healing, if you heal somebody, that is basically their health now. It's their effective health, so that's going to be modified by the armor and magic resist. But shield also works with this, okay? Shield is modified by plus healing and shielding. Right, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize, and that's why shields can feel so overpowered sometimes, is because it just feels like it takes forever to break through them. And this is why. Okay, let's say that you use a 100 shield on an ally who has 100 magic resist. Well, now it's going to take 200 damage to break that shield, because remember, if they have the 100 magic resist, then the damage is going to get reduced by 50%, right? You have a 100 shield on them, so that means it's going to take 200 damage to break a 100 shield. It's going to be reduced by 50%, so 200 damage times 0.5 is 100. So to break your 100 shield, you're going to have to do 200 magic damage. So that means that right here in this scenario, just with nice even round numbers, a 100 shield If you're protecting someone who has 100 magic resist with a shield, it's 200 magic damage required to break it. If you're trying to deal 100 magic damage to someone with 100 magic resist, you're only going to deal 50 damage. So in this scenario, the plus shielding is actually 4 times as efficient as the actual damage, because you have resistances in your favor instead of working against resistances. Okay, so that's why when you see something like a Janna shield that's going out for 350 on a Shyvana that has 100 magic resist, it's going to take 700 damage to break through that 350 Janna shield. So that's why it can just be like, oh my god, why isn't this person dying? When Janna's sitting there shielding somebody, or when Soraka's sitting there healing somebody. I mean, if Soraka heals somebody for, 300 on a 2-second cooldown, if she heals somebody for 300, then it's going to take 600 damage to cut through that 300 health if they have the 100 magic resist. Same is true of armor. If they have 100 armor and you're trying to do physical damage, it's the exact same math. So if Janna heals somebody for 300, it's going to take, 600 physical damage if they have 100 armor, or 600 magic damage if they have 100 magic resist to break through that. And so that's what makes these champions so strong. And when we get into the itemization down here, there's a lot of stuff that amplifies shield. So a lot of times, most enchanters, like Janna, for example, will have an AP ratio on their shield. So Janna has a 0.7, so if you have 100 AP, then you're going to get an extra 70 shield. And then there's also a very specific stat called plus healing and shielding that also modifies the healing and shielding. So if you're Janna, let's say that you have 100 AP as Janna, just for a nice round number, and her level 5 shield, so when she gets to level 9 and she maxes out her shield, which you should max your E first on Janna most of the time. I've gone over that in separate videos. Most notably my recent tier list video. So if you're one of those W maxers on Janna, I highly encourage you to watch my 8.3 support tier list video and just watch the Janna section. I talk about that at length for like 15 minutes. We'll talk about it just a little bit more down here, but anyways, assuming that you're maxing your shield on Janna, it's going to be 210. So that would be 210. You have 100 AP, that'd be plus 70. So that adds up first. Any modifier that they have to the shield, such as AP scaling, HP scaling in some cases, anything like that is going to add on first. Okay, so that gets you to 280. And then if you have something like a Redemption plus a Mikhail's that give you 30% extra plus healing and shielding, then you get to 364 shield. So that's how you get those big shield numbers. Okay, it's because all of this adds together. You get the AP that stacks onto the base shield, and then you get the amplifier from the plus healing and shielding that, works multiplicatively with the AP, and you start getting these really big shield numbers. Okay, so that's why enchanters can be very powerful. Okay, and that's why it can seem like, man, Janna doesn't do anything. Janna sucks. She doesn't do any damage. Well, it's going to be really hard to kill people through her because of that shield. And the same is true of a lot of other shielding champions. It's also important to note that shielding is not reduced by items that reduce healing. So it's not reduced by Morellonomicon. It's not reduced by Thornmail. Yeah, after they changed that. And then it's not reduced by Executioner's Calling. I don't know why I'm blanking on a couple of those items. But yeah, those 3 things do not reduce it. Okay, it does reduce healing. So it does reduce Soraka healing, and it does reduce like Janna's ultimate, but it does not reduce shielding. And that's why shielding is so strong. People ask me a lot of times, well, why Soraka over Janna, why this and that. There's a couple of reasons, but one of the big ones is Soraka is countered really hard by an 800 gold item, pretty much, Executioner's Calling. That cuts a lot of her healing in half. So that's a pretty brutal counter to her. That especially people gold and higher will probably recognize they could get that item. Not always, but there's the potential. You're really putting your fate in the hands of your enemies to know what that item is and to buy it. A lot of times. So that's something to consider for sure. But shields are not modified by anything right now. Riot had been thinking about adding in something as like a shield breaker item. I'm not sure if that's entirely necessary. The thing is, shields are temporary. You know, they aren't permanent health. So if you're not actively in combat, then your shield's not going to do anything. Or if they don't break your shield, then you lose some of your efficiency off of it. So, I don't know. We'll see what they do. But that's sort of the trade-off with shield. It's not permanent health. You can't heal somebody out of combat with your shield. And you're not always going to get full efficiency out of it. Because if, you know, if you have a 364 Janna shield and someone's like running away from you, for example, until it wears out, and then it wears out and then they turn around and kill you, then, you know, it didn't have any efficiency. But that's very rare. Usually shields get their maximum value in fights, but there's a chance that they don't. So that's something, you know, to think about. So anyways, that is the relative value of healing and shielding. It's far stronger than people think it is, and it's because of the way that it scales with resistances like this, okay? So it's pretty easy to understand if you just spell it out like this. Pretty much the armor and magic resist of your allies is going to make your shields very, very strong relative to trying to damage somebody through their resistances, which is going to make your damage a lot weaker. Okay, and so plus healing and shielding is better on tanks. I mean, that's the gist of it, is because, you know, if someone had 200 armor, they would get even more value out of your shielding and healing because it would take even more damage to cut through it. Okay, it would take 200% damage. So that, you know, 100 shield, it would take 300 magic damage to cut through it. Okay, basically, in another way to think about this, that math that I just told you, is every 1 armor that somebody has, or 1 magic resist, it's going to take 1% more of that type of damage to kill that person. So if you have 100 magic resist, it's going to take 100% more magic damage to cut through that. So if it's 100 shield, 100 magic resist, 200 magic damage. If it were 200 magic resist, it would take 300 damage. If it were 300 magic resist, it would take 400 damage. That's how it scales. Okay, so that's just another way to think about it. The math is the exact same. It's just sometimes that's easier to think about rather than sitting there and doing those calculations that I mentioned. Just think every 1 magic resist or every 1 armor equals 1% more of that type of damage that's required to break the shield or kill the person. Okay, so let's look at some of these items now that we understand sort of what enchanters loosely are, the types of champions that I'm talking about, and then just how powerful healing and shielding is. Let's go ahead and go in here. Now, I don't add on any modifiers or assumptions here when I do these valuations. So this is even stronger against tankier champions. So when I'm talking about how efficient this shield is here, this healing, I'm not talking about how does that work if they have 100 armor or 100 magic resist, okay? So the more magic resist they have or the more armor they have, the better these items are going to be, the ones that have the plus healing and shielding, okay? So how I do this calculation, and some people be like, well, that's not exactly the same. That's not the same. You know, there's not going to be an exact, like, one-to-one mathematical number for these things. First of all, something like Redemption has a lot of variance in it, depending on how many people you hit, how many other plus healing and shielding items you have, what level you are, you know, what their magic resists are, what their armor is, and things like that. So just for a very easy baseline assumption, I'm just assuming that you're going to get maximum value out of the heal and the shield in a fight. Okay, so if it's a 100 shield, I'm assuming the enemy's going to break that 100 shield. If you heal somebody for 100, you know, I'm assuming that someone's going to be dealt that 100 damage. Okay, just to make the math nice and simple. So that means that this is roughly equivalent to health. If you get healed for 247 health and there's no overhealing, so you're actually missing like 500 health and you get healed for 247, then that's the same thing as health. That's sort of my baseline assumption here in these calculations. Okay, that's the same thing as if you bought 247 extra health at the shop in valuation and walked into the fight with it because you're getting healed for that much. Okay, so once again, that's not the same if you get overhealed or if you don't get maximum efficiency out of the shield, but just for the sake of like relatively easy to understand calculations, then that's my baseline assumption. So health is worth 2.66 gold each. All right, and so that's what I'm working with here. So I'm assuming that the heal is equivalent to health, and I'm assuming that the shield is also equivalent to health in a combat situation. Okay, so not the same. It's not going to interact with, like, if you're Mundo, it's not the same as having extra health with Mundo. It doesn't give the extra damage scaling, like if you're Shin. So yeah, it doesn't have all the same benefits of flat health, okay? It just doesn't. But just for simple calculations, that's my baseline assumption, okay? And then you can sort of It's just to give you the gist of how efficient items are. That's the point. It's like, which items should you buy and how efficient are they relative to each other? So that's why I'm creating this common sort of underlying assumption about how much is healing and shielding worth. Okay, so, you either agree or disagree with that, but just for the sake of establishing comparisons between items, that's what I'm going with, all right? Okay, so if you look at redemption here, the base stats are pretty easy to calculate, and LeagueWiki is a great resource if you want to check this out. This is what I use for a lot of my calculations. They just do a wonderful job with the statistics. So the baseline value here, they add it all up for you under cost analysis, and they'll tell you this. What they can't tell you is how much this active is worth. And so I go through, crunch some numbers. Redemption is the kind of the grayest, fuzziest item. It's the most difficult to calculate what it's actually worth because there's so many variables in it, okay? But the baseline itemization is worth, it's 98% gold efficient. So you're paying 2,100 gold for about 2,054 gold worth of value. It's a pretty good baseline valuation. The active at level 9, okay, so you're level 9, you don't have any other items. This is the first item. You don't have any other plus healing and shielding. If you take the Revitalize rune, it's going to change the math, okay? It's going to make it better, all right? But this is just assuming this is the first item that you buy. You don't have any other plus healing or shielding in your runes, and your allies don't have, like, a Spirit Visage or anything else that's going to increase their plus healing or shielding. Okay, so it's going to heal each ally for 247, and that's going to be roughly equivalent to 657 gold value per ally, okay, in a fight when you use this active. All right, now don't forget it also does damage. People forget this sometimes. It does 10% of the maximum health of an enemy in true damage, okay, and this is where I got that level 9, 190 health, okay. And then, so you get the 190, and then you get it has its own plus 10% healing and shielding. How did I get to the... Oh, it gets triple value. Okay. So when you're calculating that, you have plus 10% healing and shielding value, and then it triples. Okay, the active triples. So it's 3 times your plus healing and shielding power. So if you go with the 190, multiply it, that's how you get to the 247, okay? So that's how it works. All right, so it's 657 gold value per person. We're just going to assume if it's in the mid-game level 9, a 2,000 HP target. Once again, that's going to vary a lot. If you're talking about you're hitting another Enchanter support or an AD carry, they might only have 1,500 HP or 1,400 HP by that point. If you're talking about a big tank that has, a big item or two, then they might have 2,500 HP. So it's going to vary, but I'm just going to call it 2,000 HP. It's just kind of a nice, clean number to work with here, okay? So that's 200 true damage per enemy hit. So you're doing 247 healing per ally hit and 200 true damage per enemy hit, okay? 200 true damage is roughly equal to 300 magic damage versus a 50 magic resist target, okay? Given that math that I talked about up here in terms of... plus healing and shielding, because 300 magic damage, so if we do 100 divided by 150, okay, so 50 magic resist, 50 plus 100, that's going to block about 33% of the damage, and then you do that times 300, and that takes you to 200, okay, so that's how I'm doing that math there. So if someone were to do 300 magic resist and someone had a 50 magic resist target, which once again, a squishy champion could have around that number. Tanks are going to have much higher than that by level 9. Just, once again, nice clean number here that's a reasonable, sort of average that you could think of. So how do you value that? How do you value something that does 300 damage on hit? Well, the closest thing I could think of was Hextech Revolver. So this is the closest pure damage active item that's out there, where you can do it once over a certain period of time just to see how much that's worth in terms of valuation, okay? So the raw gold value here is worth 870. That doesn't include the active. Okay, so that means that you have an extra 180 gold for this, okay? So at level 9, that would do 85 damage. So you're basically paying 180 gold to have an active that's single target that does 85 magic damage. Okay? So that is 180 gold for 85 magic damage, okay? At the same level that I'm talking about here with Redemption, the level 9, all right? So if we math that out, 180 divided by 85, you're paying about 2.11, you're getting about 2.11 gold out of value for that, okay? So 85 damage, you're paying 2.11 gold to purchase that. Okay, so now if we say, all right, well, we need 300 magic damage, how much is that worth? Okay, then we do 300 magic damage times 2.11 per magic damage dealt. That would be 633 gold worth of value on an enemy. Okay, so in this scenario, against a 2,000 HP average target around level 9, you're getting about 633 gold worth of value for each enemy that you hit. Okay, so fairly realistic scenario. Really conservative. At level 9, let's say that you hit 2 allies, you hit yourself, and you hit your 80 carry bot lane, and you hit 1 enemy. So you hit their tank that's trying to dive your 80 carry with this, for example. Okay, and it doesn't matter how much resistances the tank has, okay, because it's true damage. Now, we were assuming 50 magic resist, but this becomes even more valuable if that tank has more resistances, okay? This is worth even more gold, but once again, we're trying to keep it as simple as we can here with Redemption, all right? So you hit 2 allies, 1 enemy. It's going to be a grand total of 1947 for the active, and then you have the baseline stats of 2054. So that gives you a 4,001 gold value in that exchange. So that's 191% efficient. So whenever you buy it, single item power spike, no other items, very simple scenario. You hit yourself and your 80 carry, and you hit the one person who's trying to dive you, the jungler or the support or whatever that's in that circle. 191% efficient, all right? Now, if you step it up a notch, you say, okay, well, how does that work as a 2-item power spike? Well, if we look at the active at level 11, if you have a Mikhail's Crucible, then you're going to get 437 healing per ally hit, because Mikhail's Crucible is going to give you an extra 20% healing and shielding. Remember that with Redemption, you get 3 times the value of that, so that's an extra 60% healing and shielding off of it. And then Redemption naturally goes up in terms of its baseline value per level. So level 11, you get 230, and now you're going to get 90% plus healing and shielding. So you're going to get the 230, because remember the base, it has 10% plus healing and shielding on it. You're getting 20% off of Mikhail's. That's a total of 30%. And then you get 3 times the value on Redemption. Okay? So if we're looking at level 11, that's 230 times extra 90%, 1.9. Takes us to 437. All right, so that's where I get that number. Okay, so 437 healing per ally. That's the equivalent of about 1162 gold value per ally hit. So now let's say that we're getting into bigger team fights here, and you're going to hit 3 allies and 2 enemies. Okay, so you're going to hit yourself, your 80 carry, and like one other tank that's sort of in the middle of this, you know, just massive team fight. Okay. So now the value is going to be roughly 6806 values. That's 324% efficiency. So that's getting very efficient. Now, you can do some of this math yourself and see, well, what happens if I hit 5 allies and 5 enemies? Well, it goes through the roof. You know, I didn't do the exact calculation, so it'll be somewhere around 10,000 10,000 or more gold, and then it'll give you like, you know, maybe a 400 or 500% cost efficiency. But that's kind of unrealistic in most scenarios. I think this is a pretty reasonable assumption. This might even be a little generous, but this is a pretty reasonable assumption for a big team fight, that you're going to be able to hit a few of your allies and a couple of enemies, all right? So the bottom line is this item is very efficient both at 1 items and 2 items. Okay, so 1 item, it's 191% efficient. It's a very, very good purchase still, even after like 5 nerfs last year and changes to it. It's still a very efficient purchase. Both early at single item and later. So when you combine it with another popular item like Mikhail's Crucible, then it's going to get even more powerful. Okay, so it's good at 1 item and it's good at 2 items. Okay, and so on and so forth. So that means it's a very good base item because it's good in and of itself as a single item, and it scales really well with pretty much every other item that you're going to get as support. So that makes it a really strong foundational item. Okay, And don't forget, Redemption has 5,500 range. That is really far. Like, you can almost hit mid lane from bot lane. Like, you just have to walk up river a little bit, and you can hit the mid lane from the bot lane. That is very powerful. I mean, that's like you have a little mini Soraka ult with you. You have to aim it. But that's very, very strong. Right? So now, you know, even if you're just kind of farming off bottom, there's not a lot of action down there. But, you know, suddenly a fight breaks out mid lane. You have, you know, both junglers get involved and the mid laners are fighting to the death. Your Redemption drops in, you know, hits 2 allies, hits 2 enemies, gets a really efficient, like, turn in the fight. Like, I've seen several fights turned by this. Okay? So you have great global influence with this. That's almost like you're roaming. Like, you get a free roam to mid lane. Not quite the same, but you can think of it kind of like that, right? It's almost like a Gangplank ult or something. Where you can have this tremendous influence at a pretty good range across the map. Not as far as GPs, obviously. But that's really, really good. Especially in solo queue where people are constantly getting into bad fights around the map. And you have the chance to maybe bail them out even if you're not in the area. Okay? Now, another thing to consider about Redemption, though, is it's the highest skill cap support item. You have to really look at your minimap, especially if you're going to maximize this 5,500 range. And you have to understand the situation. Like, is it worth using my Redemption there? Can I actually turn that fight? Is it going to be too late if I do it? How long do I wait before I use it? You know, is my ally going to run out of it? So if they're running away from somebody and you're trying to save them, you have to aim it and calculate, okay, you know, it's going to take 2.5 seconds to land, so I think it's 2.5, right? Yeah, 2.5 second delay. So it's going to take 2.5 seconds to land. Am I aiming this just right to hit my ally? Or are they going to have to stop and double back and maybe get killed to try to stay in it? So, you know, it's really tricky to aim. Because sometimes you have to think, well, my ally might have their dash up in a second and they might have to jump, you know, forward to avoid the enemy. So you have to not only think about what's their current move speed if you're trying to target someone who's running away, but you can also think about, okay, are they going to use their dash sometime soon? Should I aim it even further away? Should I lead that skill shot even more? So it's really complicated. A good way to help with this, though, is when you're going to drop it down, especially in a hot team fight when people just aren't paying attention, ping it. So whenever whenever I'm dropping a Redemption, like mid lane from bot lane, I ping it a couple of times. Just so that they look at it. So they look on the ground, they're like, oh, there's a Redemption there. And then they'll notice that it gets hit. So whenever you cast a Redemption, go ahead and use a ping, you know, and I just ping the green on the way right in the middle of the Redemption, just so that they know that the Redemption's coming in. So just make sure that if you're using this, especially if you're using it from a distance, let your allies know by using that ping, okay? Now, some people won't notice or care. They'll still run out of it anyways, but there's a much, much higher chance that they're actually going to pay attention and get in the Redemption, okay? Okay, and as I mentioned before, Redemption scales very well with plus healing and shielding, so if you get Mikhail's, you get Ardent Sensor, it's going to be very good. It also scales really well with Athene's Unholy Grail, which we'll talk about because it has 150% mana regeneration on it, which is great. So it scales pretty well with Locket because it has plus health and plus healing and shielding, so it just scales very well with every other item you could get. Okay, and it's very good with Ingenious Hunter, which is something that I recommend Ingenious plus Zombie Ward on a lot of enchanters. So it's just really good with runes that are strong right now. It's really great with other items. It's good at 1 item. It's good at 2 item in terms of power spike, excellent scaling, great range, great utility. It's just the item that you should be rushing most of the time on most enchanters. Okay. All right, so let's talk about, it also has great, we'll talk about this a little bit more here in a second, but it also has a great build path. Like, it has Fairy Charms in it, it's got a Ruby Crystal in it, a Reju Bead, so it has a lot of these regen items, which are really good for the laning phase. Like, being able to just buy a Reju Bead or just buy a couple of Fairy Charms is so nice for the laning phase, because laning phase are usually protracted, sort of long, a long series of small trades. That's what I'm trying to say. So people will trade a couple of abilities, will trade a couple auto attacks. You know, there might be some all-ins depending on the lane, but in general, it's just kind of small scale, just over time, you know, over the course of 5 or 10 minutes, just people taking light damage and taking light trades a lot of the time. And so that's when regeneration's at its best. So, you know, at 25 minutes in the game, health regeneration's not going to matter that much most of the time because people are going to have a lot of items and they're going to kill each other really fast in team fights, so you're not going to have time to really get the full value out of that regeneration. And the same is true to a lesser extent of mana regen. Mana regen is still pretty good even later in the game, but the bottom line is that regeneration is usually best really early in the game when you're having these light trades instead of these massive like all-ins where people die instantly and there's, you know, not a lot of length to them. You know, the fight might go on for 5 or 10 seconds and that's going to be it, right? Whereas like laning phase before you get your next back to get another item might be 3 minutes. And so that makes this itemization really, really good early to get those regen items. Okay, versus like if you go something else first, if you go Ardent Censer first and then you get Redemption after that, you're going to lose a lot of the early game value of having something like a Reju Bead in the lane because it's not going to matter when you get that Reju Bead later on in the game. So it's just a little bit less efficient to do it that way. Okay, so let's look at Ardent Censer here real quick. So Ardent Censer used to be the primetime item. Some people still rush this item. I think that's incorrect most of the time. And I'm going to talk about why here really quick. All right, so let's look at Ardent Censer. It still has all of its great base stats, okay? It's even more efficient than Redemption in terms of its base stats, right? So it has 24, 92 base stats, which is 108% gold efficient versus, you know, Redemption's 98% gold efficient. And these stats are very good even throughout the entire game, right? So it doesn't have a lot of regen on it. It only has 50% base regen, but it has 60 ability power, 10% cooldown reduction, 10% shielding, plus 8% movement speed. All this is very good. And these stats are going to be better as the game progresses, right? So later in the game, these stats are going to be superior to Redemption stats because the plus healing and shielding, as I just mentioned, or not the plus healing and shielding, the health regen is going to be less valuable later in the game. Mana regen, still pretty valuable, but less valuable later than it is early, okay, when you're in your laning phase. Ability power, conversely, is going to get much better later on in the game, okay? So as you know, level up your abilities more, it's going to increase the base damage of those more, and it scales really well with the plus healing and shielding that I mentioned before. So this is especially good on champions that have really high AP scaling. So someone like Rakan, who has a 1.6 ratio when he uses both of his shields with his E, who has like a 0.9 on his passive, who has like a 0.8 healing, I believe, on his Q. It's really, really good on Rakan. Or like Janna, who has a 0.7 shield. That's a pretty big shield. So that's really nice. It has the same it has 10% cooldown reduction, same thing as Redemption, so that's good. It has the same 10% healing and shielding, has less mana regen, and the movement speed's really nice for rotations and just for safety and positioning in fights. So it's really good. But yeah, one of the marquee things, the big value, is the ability power on this. So that makes it really good. Like I said, especially on champions, have really good AP ratios. Sona used to have a really good AP ratio on her Q and her W. It was insane. I know that before, like 100 and... I don't remember what it was on her Q. 100 and something. I think it was like 110% on her Q, and her W in like great scenarios was like 200 to 300%. Like AP. It was just like insane. They've nerfed it a lot since the beginning of the preseason. Okay, so it's not as efficient. But that's why these items, you know, historically have been so strong, like Ardent Censer specifically, has been so strong on someone like a Sona or on someone like a Janna, people who have really good AP ratios. All right, a little bit less so on Taric. It can be good on Taric to an extent, but he has awful AP ratios. Like, he just does not scale very well in terms of AP, okay? So, good base stats. But let's look at the what's this passive worth now? Now Redemption Ardent Censer has been nerfed a ton since last season. This was the defining item of, you know, the back half of 2017, right? In competitive league, everybody rushed Ardent Censer all the time. Okay, it's really strong. They nerfed it really hard several times. Okay, so you know, for people out there who maybe just look at MOBA Fire build from like, you know, 2017, and they say, oh, Redemption, okay, I'll get that. Not the same, okay? If you're going to look at online guides like that are just simple text guides that don't have explanations, like I do in my guides, then you need to at least find a really new guide, okay? Okay, so they nerfed it in 7.17, changed from 25% at all levels to scaling, and then they changed the on hit from 25 to 20 to 30. This actually ended up being a buff. So they were trying to hurt it early game, but keep it intact for late game. That did not work. Okay? This is where they really slapped it pretty hard on 7.19. Okay, so they removed the healing, which is a massive, massive component of why this item was so strong. And Okay, so that's the same thing. So yeah, it looks like they pretty much made it the same thing, but the on-hit healing was removed. And then they made it to where, like, the support that uses this, or the champion that uses this, also gets the buff. So they were trying to take off the healing and give sort of this compensatory buff. It was weird, but it was still a really good item. Then 721 is where they crushed it. They said, okay, we've had enough of this item for good. All right, so the attack speed is reduced to 10% to 30%. So 10% at lower levels. And then the on-hit was reduced from 20 to 5. 5 to 20, okay? So that's kind of where we're at now. So it's a decent item, but it's definitely far, far weaker than it was, you know, about 10 patches or so ago. Okay? So how does this work? All right, it's got the baseline efficiency. If we look at level 9, you look at the on-hit plus the attack speed, it's a total buff of like 775 gold per ally. So if you're looking at... you know, you're buffing up yourself and you're buffing up your enemies, so you just have a single target shield, you know, like Lulu would have, or Janna or Karma. You know, single target shield is going to be 176% efficient. Okay, so that's going to be less than Redemption, and kind of the baseline Redemption case here. Now, keep in mind that as you level up, this item gets a lot better, okay? So it goes from this kind of rinky-dink, you know, I was looking at level 9, the 12 on hit, and the 19% there. If you go to level 13, then it's 24% attack speed, and 16 on hit instead of 12. So it does gain value over time. It also gains value when the person that you're buffing has more attack speed, because the more attack speed they have, the more they're going to be able to proc the on hit. So champions that buy a lot of attack speed would like this. So something like a Callista, Varus, Kog'Maw, you know, all these champions that have like the Gensu's builds, or champions that get Hurricane. Hurricane's very good too, because each one of the Hurricane bolts actually applies Ardent Sensor. So, you know, if you have a Twitch who's hitting 3 people at once with Hurricane, and he's hitting a bunch of other people with his ultimate because it goes through and hits multiples, then each one of those hits is going to trigger Ardent Sensor. So Ardent is very good on champions like Twitch, like Callista. Anyone that's going to get Hurricane or Gensu's Rageblade or both, it's going to be a good item on them, okay? Also, any support that has multi-target healing can be really good. So, something like Sona, for example, her shield could potentially touch your entire team. So you could get 5 buffs of 775, and that's obviously going to make it a lot more efficient, right? That's going to push it into the 200% efficiency range. Or if you are playing Karma and you mantra her shield and it hits all 5 of your allies, then that's going to be really huge. That also has pretty good synergy if you use Locket of the Iron Solari and shield everybody. They will get the buff for 6 seconds. Or if you use Redemption and heal everybody on your team, they'll get the buff. Another good trick with this, if you're going to use Ardent Sensor, you really need to take Font of Life. Okay? So the way this works was like the old school, I forgot what it was called, but like with the masteries last season, there was a mastery that was very similar to this. Blanking out on the name right now. But pretty much how this works is if you slow somebody or disable them in any way and an ally hits them, they get a heal, okay? They're healed for 1% of your maximum health. Okay, which is not a lot. So as an enchanter, your max health, you know, in the mid-game might be 1,500. So they're only going to heal for, you know, 15 in that case, plus 5, 20. You know, 20 on-hit healing is pretty respectable. But the thing that makes this really sweet is that heal counts as coming from you. So that means it triggers Ardent Sensor. Okay, so if you're Janna, for example, and you walk up and you W somebody and it slows them for the 3 seconds, or 2 seconds, whatever it is now, if they've nerfed it so many times. 2 seconds, I think. Then anyone who attacks that person gets the heal and gets Ardent Sensor. So you walk up, let's say that you W their Shyvana that's trying to dive you to slow her down. All right, and then your AD carry auto-attacks him. Your Yasuo auto-attacks him. Your Camille auto-attacks him. And your Syndra from mid lane auto-attacks him. Each one of those people that autos them is going to get the Ardent Sensor buff. So that's a way that even though Janna, historically, unless she ults like in terms of her abilities, is not going to be able to trigger Ardent Censer on multiple targets. Now you can with Font of Life, okay? So that's what makes this so good. So if you think you might get an Ardent Censer in a game, you should be running Font of Life. I mean, I advocate for Font of Life on pretty much every enchanter anyways, because I prefer Guardian, like right now before they change around the Resolve tree in 8.4. We'll see what happens. But, you know, Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning, and either Revitalize or Second Wind. And a big part of it is because Font of Life is so powerful with Ardent Censer. Like, that gives you a really good option there. Especially if you have a lot of on-hit people on your team. People who like to auto-attack a lot. You know, Master Yi, Shyvana, Yasuo, Riven, Camille, Fiora. You know, all of those kinds of champions are pretty popular right now. And Ardent Censer is a pretty big buff on them. Okay? And that means you don't have to specifically put the shield on somebody to get the buff. So maybe, like, you really want your, I don't know, your Shyvana to have this buff when she's attacking their front line. But you really need to save your shield for your AD carry, because you know Zed's going to dive him and try to all-in kill him, okay? So before, without Font of Life, you would have to choose, well, I want the Ardent Censer on Shyvana so she can tear through their tanks, so do I put the shield on her to give her the Ardent Censer buff, or do I save my shield and put it on my AD carry so the AD carry doesn't die to Zed? Okay, well, now you don't have to choose. You can W, you know, a target that Shyvana is going to attack, and then save your shield so you can help, you know, mitigate a lot of that Zed damage. So it just makes it a lot more versatile with Ardent Censer if you have Font of Life. So Ardent Censer, very good, much better with champions who buy attack speed items, Gensu's, Hurricane. Also good with multi-hit abilities like Sona, like Karma, and then also very good with anything that's going to provide a shield or a heal to a lot of people. That's Redemption, Locket, Font of Life. So this is not necessarily the best single item that you should get on most enchanters. On maybe Sona, it's possible, okay? Or like maybe Karma, it's possible. All right, so there are a couple of enchanters where maybe you could look at this, but on a lot of champions, it's much better as at least a second item, okay? So it's going to give it, you're going to level up more, so it's going to be stronger, and you're going to have that extra benefit of having something like a Redemption to help you proc it on multiple people. Okay, so it is good. It's not the end of the world. If you want to rush this, it's okay. You know, if you do have a Hurricane, like if you have a Twitch that's 4-0 in lane or something, and he's like rushing Hurricane, sure, you know, you can still get it. But the thing to keep in mind about it is it doesn't have any defensive stats, like no health, no armor, no magic resist on it. And it has really low base mana regen, so if you're a mana hungry champion like a Nami or, you know, something like that, even Sona, then you're not going to get a lot of mana regen out of it, so that's a problem. It only has 50% instead of Redemption's 150%, and it just kind of buffs some of your allies depending on these interactions that we talked about. It doesn't have the range of 550, it doesn't heal them or shield them or protect them from harm in any way, so if the enemy has a lot of damage or if they're ahead, then, you know, your team's not going to be doing damage if they're dead. So, you know, regardless of how much the Ardent Censer buffs them up, if they're dead, they're not doing damage. Unless they're like Karthus or Kog'Maw or Scion or something. But, anyways. So it is good, but it's really if you're going to buy it first, it's a luxury item that helps you snowball harder if you have an AD carry that's on hit and they're really fed. Okay, that's the scenario where you would buy this early. Okay, otherwise it needs to be a second or third item usually, so that it scales up more and so that you have other things that you need, like health, defenses, mana regen, things like that. So it has a lot less teamfight presence than something like a Locket or Redemption, but it's a lot better at buffing up really high damage threats that your own team might have, particularly the AD carry. Okay, let's look at another item here, Mikhail's Crucible. Alright, so this is a very niche item. The stats on it aren't really that great. They're okay, but the active is super good. So it's 2195 efficient if you include the base 100 health regen that you get for the 100 mana regen that it has on it. Then you get to a total of 2495. So that's 118% efficiency. Pretty solid. But it doesn't really buff anybody on your team. It doesn't heal, it doesn't shield, it doesn't buff like Ardent Censer. So it doesn't have the same kind of like large teamfight scaling implications. Okay, now the active is difficult to evaluate. Okay, so basically it cleanses any crowd control that is not a suppress. Most things, they're not suppresses. So it removes stuns, roots, taunts, fears, charms, silences, slows, and grants slow immunity for 2 seconds. It also gives you 40% movement speed for 2 seconds. Okay, so it doesn't remove blinds. It doesn't like a Teemo blind or a Quinn blind. It doesn't remove like a Malzahar ultimate or a Warwick ultimate, okay, because those are suppressions. So there are some things it doesn't get, but it gets most things, okay? It will remove most things. All right, so the rough equivalent of this, naturally people would think of Quicksilver Sash. If we look at Quicksilver Sash... then Quicksilver Sash is roughly worth, the active is valued at 716 gold. Okay. So I just went ahead and went with that number here. The reason is, you know, Quicksilver does clear suppression and it has a lower cooldown, 90-second cooldown versus 2 minutes. But Mikhail's gives you the 40% move speed and the slow resistance for 2 seconds. So that's some really good extra utility. So they're different, you know, and it's kind of apples to oranges here to some extent, but that's just the closest equivalency in terms of valuation that we could have. So, you know, overall, it's 155% efficient if you use the active on cooldown in a fight. But once again, you know, that's very difficult to value, right? Because Quicksilver Sash sometimes is just really bad. Like, if you use it at the wrong time or you forget to use it or whatever, it's really bad. It can be game deciding, though. You know, the same thing with Mikhail's. If you cleanse, if your AD carry gets hit by an Ash Arrow, for example, and you cleanse it away immediately, and your team is able to run forward and, like, have a good fight now because there's no Ash Arrow, you can safely engage and win the game. It's hard to put a price on that, right? Or just, like, yeah, anything that you're going to clear away. Like, Ari charms your LeBlanc, and the enemy team, like, goes in and tries to kill him, but then you... cleanse that away and LeBlanc gets away and you bait him into an engage pretty much and then end up winning the fight. That's really good. So it's hard to fully value Mikhail. So it's a very situational item, in other words. And there's not really a good break point for me to tell you, yes, you buy this item. Like, you just kind of have to feel it out and think about it logically. You know, if the enemy team has a lot of crowd control, like they have a Thresh or a Leona or an Ashe, like Ashe is usually a huge flag, like, that you should get a Mikhail's. Leona, Thresh, Sejuani. There are a lot of champions that have a bit of quite a bit of CC. So if you think that your allies are going to be getting hit with this, then it's really good. Especially on champions that are immobile, like a Jinx or a Kog'Maw or a Twitch, like people that can't really dodge stuff that easily. This is super helpful. Now, Tahm Kench, this is the reason why a lot of people play Tahm Kench, is because he can do this basically on this plus give your ally invulnerability for some amount of time, then it's on a 10-second cooldown. So this is like the entire existence of Tahm Kench. A lot of it is because he basically has this as an ability where he can cleanse crowd control effectively and protect allies. So it's really, really strong. It's a very strong ability. I mean, it almost single-handedly makes a champion viable out there who does this very well. Okay? And it also scales with mana regen, and it buffs up redemption is kind of the main reason you would get this item. So if you get more mana regen, then it ends up giving you more health regen. God, my hair is killing me. Need a haircut. But it ends up giving you extra health regen, which once again, by the time you're getting a lot of extra mana regen, it's not going to be that impactful probably. I mean, if you go redemption into Mikhail's, like that extra mana regen is pretty nice, like 150% extra health regen. It's actually pretty legit. I mean, that's like an extra, you know, if we look at someone like Janna. You know, I'm saying health regen isn't as important later on in the game, but it's still, like, nice, you know? Still a decent stat. So if you look at Janna, you know, level 11 or so, her health regen's 10.3. So if you're getting an extra 150% health regen, you're getting, like, 25 health per 5. So that's, like, 5 per second. That's 300 health per minute. So if you're kind of wandering around, you know, rotating from place to place over the course of a minute, Did I do that right? Yeah, 12. Yeah, I'm right. 300 health per minute. You know, then that's helpful. So it's not like super game breaking, but it is valuable to have that in there. And the big kicker, like I mentioned before, is it buffs up redemption. So that extra 20% plus healing and shielding becomes 60% plus healing and shielding on the redemption active. So it's a really good combo with redemption itself. Okay, so a common build if you are facing a bunch of crowd control is just to go, you know, redemption into Mikhail's. So pretty cheap. They have great synergy with each other. The Mikhail's boosts up the redemption active, and then the 150%, you know, mana regen off of redemption boosts up the Mikhail's plus healing and shielding. So they work very, very well together in terms of your overall kits. That would allow you to have a pretty good presence in team fights, but also be able to negate a lot of engage that the enemy might have, particularly on some immobile squishy targets that you might have on your team. Okay. Now the other really popular item is Locket of the Iron Solari. Okay, so you don't see this all the time on enchanters. They tried to design it to dissuade enchanters from getting this item, because they wanted to, like, their design philosophy back last spring, because it used to be everybody got Redemption Locket every single game, and those items were ridiculously powerful back from like January to March of 2017. And then they rebalanced them, and they tried to get people to want to get redemption if they are an enchanter. All right, so that's why they added it. Used to have just a really high base amount of plus healing and shielding, or a really high base amount of the active healing on redemption, and they reduced it a ton. And now they said, well, if you want realistic healing and shielding now, you need to get the stat plus healing and shielding to make this item as good as it once used to be. Okay, and then likewise with Locket, they lowered the base shield a lot. Let me just show you here. We'll pull up Locket. Show you what they did with it here. So they lowered the base shield a lot. And then they gave it scaling with health from the caster. Okay, so it looks like they did this in 7.12. So that was a bit later than I remember. Did they? Now I want to see redemption. I feel like they did it with redemption a lot earlier than that. But maybe it was that late. I guess 7.12 would be like roughly 24 weeks in, which is like 6 months in. So that was maybe around June. I was thinking they did this back in March. No, okay, so they did nerf it really early. They nerfed it in 7.2. Okay, so they took the health down, they took this down, and they reduced the active heal by a lot. Now, it doesn't say that here they added it to where it scales with 30, like you get 30% extra value off of the, you get 3 times the value is what I'm trying to say, off of plus healing and shielding. I think that's when they did that in 7.2. No, they didn't, actually. They just straight punched it in the face in 7.2, but it was still pretty good. It was just, like, ridiculously overpowered beforehand, I guess. And then this is, yeah, 7.12. Okay, so they did it at 7.12, so it was June and not, like, March, like I thought. But this is when they changed that around. So they lowered it even more, and now they gave it the 3 times the healing. Okay, so they're trying to get you not to buy Redemption plus Locket, but it's still really good to buy Redemption plus Locket, okay? They kind of failed to that extent. Is that right, Rory?
Yes.
Did they fail?
They failed.
Let's see.
Rory's got a full belly.
Is that right, Rory? Look at the camera.
She's got a full belly.
Yay! She's looking at you. My wife's like pointing to the camera. She's looking at my wife. She's like, no, I'm just going to look at the printer. Is that right, Rory? Yay! Yay! Tickle, tickle, full belly. Is that right, Rory? You want to grab my headphones?
Rory wants to help with the commentary.
She wants my mic. You want to talk? You want to say something, Rory? The mic?
Ba, 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 ba.
Yeah, that mic is not turned on, Rory.
You say ba, ba, ba.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
There we go.
Bedtime.
Yay. Bedtime for Rory.
There we go. Say good night, Daddy.
Good night, Rory. Anyways, okay, so what's up with Locket? Now, this item has been, I won't go into all of the history of it, but this has been, whatever version of this item has been core on every support basically since Season 1. It used to be called Aegis of the Legion. It used to give an aura that protected everybody. Then it became Bulwark. Then it eventually became Locket of the Iron Solari, and it used to give this passive magic resist and all this other stuff and have all these great stats on it. So they've changed this item like 5 million times over the history of League, pretty much. And yeah, so we're kind of where it is today. All right, so they introduced it proper in Season 3, but it used to be an Aegis of the Legion was what it was called. And they changed the name to Bulwark in here somewhere. And then they changed it back. So anyways, what it is now is it's designed specifically to be a team fight domination item that is really gold inefficient if you don't use it properly in a team fight. Okay, so they want to make it a higher risk, higher reward item. And they added this scaling in here, this 2% to 30% bonus health ratio, to really highly incentivize tanks to take this item over enchanters. Okay, but it still has pretty decent plus healing and shielding, or shielding rather, and don't forget that this also scales with plus healing and shielding. Okay, so this still benefits from plus healing and shielding, and it also benefits from health. Okay, so champions that can get items that have a lot of health and plus healing and shielding, like a Tarek, or to a lesser extent, maybe a Rakan. Tarek specifically because he gets the Targon's line. He goes to Eye of the Equinox, or whatever it's called now. The health gold item. Then this is really good on Tarek because he gets this bonus off of that, and he can potentially get things like Redemption that give you extra plus healing and shielding. So this is a dream item for Tarek, but it's good on a lot of other champions too. Okay, so if we look at the efficiency of this item, it's not that efficient, right? It's only 76% efficient with the stats itself when the active is on cooldown. That is trash compared to these other ones, right? Mikhail's Crucible is even 119% efficient. The base stats, you know, Ardent's 108 and Redemption is 98. So 76 is really bad. Okay, so that means a lot of that means you should not rush this item. Like, never ever rush Locket as your very first item. Okay, even on tanks, a lot of times you really don't want to do it. You want to get another item first. You know, I have a completely separate tank itemization video, but usually you'll get at least like a Knight's Vow, and then you get this next because you want the scaling first. So the active at level 9, if you have no other activations, then it's 236 shield per person. So that's 628 per person. If you hit 3 people, so you hit yourself and 2 other allies, then that turns it to 162% efficiency. So that's still pretty good at level 9. So the 162, you know, it's probably going to beat out of Mikhail's, depending on, once again, Mikhail's is tough to value, but it will probably beat out of Mikhail's in a team fight. Remember, you have to hit 3 people for this. Doesn't work if you just, you know, you shield your ally who's in trouble, and then you never use your portion of the shield because they're not attacking you. Like, that's going to be really inefficient. Okay? So, respectable efficiency. Now, this is one where you may not use all of the shield because it only lasts for 2.5 seconds, okay? So, it's going to shield everybody. The shield on you may not always work, but, you know, that's just, it's difficult to calculate that, as I said before, because I'm just assuming 100% shield efficiency. May or may not happen. You know, you can usually guarantee that it's going to be efficient on one person, at least, the person who's, like, directly under attack, but it may not benefit the other people as much unless there's a lot of area of effect damage. Like, if your whole team's sitting in a Gangplank ult, then yeah, it's going to be 100% efficient. But in other scenarios, maybe not. And that's one thing that's different from Redemption, is that that shield only lasts 2.5 seconds. Redemption, if anybody's hurt, even if they're not currently under attack, it's still going to heal them, right? Whereas with Locket, that shield may not always be 100% efficient. But on the flip side, you don't have to aim this. It's instant. Boom. everybody gets shielded, okay? Whereas Redemption, you have to have a 2.5 second lead time. So Locket can be much better against like very high burst assassins. So that Zed's trying to jump on your AD carry, or you know, your whole team's about to get hit with like a Ziggs ult or something like that. Okay, so Locket is instant, but it's short range, doesn't have the 5500 range. The shield is not always as efficient as it could be, but it also can't be reduced by the healing and shielding modifier. So if the enemy has a Morellonomicon, if it's a Ziggs, they have Morellonomicon, they just lowered your whole team to like 40%, then the healing would be cut in half off of Redemption. But with Locket, you know, Locket has you covered because it's a shield. So it's always had a very interesting relationship with Redemption and Locket, since they've both been in the meta at the same time since near the very end of Season 6. Okay, so, you know, it could be up to 162% efficient at level 9 with 3 allies if it's full efficiency. Okay, at level 11, if you have Redemption, the Redemption is going to increase the healing and shielding off of it, so you're going to get 356 per person for a total of 947 gold per person. Efficiency, you hit 3 allies with that, that's going to be 229% efficient. So that's starting to get pretty good. Okay, so if it's level 11 and you're pairing it with Redemption, and you're getting 229% efficiency. So then it's probably going to be potentially surpassing something like Ardent Sensor in terms of team-wide protection, and it's not going to be quite as good as Redemption. Really not even close in this scenario. But once again, it's going to have, in many cases, it's going to have a higher a higher efficiency potentially because it's instant cast. You can't miss it. Your allies can't run out of it. You know, nothing like that can happen. The only way that it becomes inefficient is if basically the enemy just stops attacking or hitting your team. So this item is really designed specifically as a team fight domination item. If you have a team that really favors 5v5 fights and you're going to try to force some fights, Locket of the Iron Solari is really good. Okay? If it's just going to be, you're going to be running around randomly and there's just going to be a bunch of skirmishing and you're going to be going from lane to lane trying to put out all these fires from where your allies are just running in circles, you know, dying over and over again to assassins, it's not going to be as efficient because you're not going to have as many people close by. You know, you're only going to be using your shield to save your ally a lot of the times. And it's only going to hit one person and be pretty inefficient. So if you get this item, it needs to be because you think your team is going to have a really good team fight. Okay, so this item plus Redemption means that it's almost going to be impossible to lose a lot of team fights if the game's close. Okay, because they work so well together. Because you can cast Redemption while you're waiting on that 2.5 second cast, then you cast Locket, it'll shield and protect everybody for 2.5 seconds, then after that protection, then Redemption comes down and heals them up for the damage that they took prior to you casting Locket. So yeah, a really good way to, you know, make sure you're going to win a fight is fight breaks out, a lot of damage is going down, you just Redemption, Locket immediately. That basically is going to give your team, like, it's almost like invulnerability for 2.5 seconds. It's almost like you got a little Terror Cult there for 2.5 seconds because, once again, the Locket's going to prevent a lot of it, and then any excess damage that they deal, Redemption's going to heal the rest of that away. So it's really good. It's like peanut butter and jelly. Very good combination to get both those items. So on a lot of enchanters, depending on the game state, if you are in a team comp where you highly want to favor team fights, then that's a really good option. Okay, I need to move on here a little bit quicker, and then we're just about done. Okay, final item that I want to look at is the Themes Unholy Grail. People mention this item a lot. It's not that great most of the time on most enchanters. Alright, so, and a lot of it has to do with the efficiency. So if we look at the Themes Unholy Grail, it's 121% efficient on the base stats. That's the best base stat efficiency of anything. But the scaling is so low. So the passive, whenever you deal 100 damage, you get 25% of that as a heal. So every 100 damage you deal is going to have a 66 gold value attached to it. Okay? So if you deal 1,000 damage in a team fight, and that's a lot as an enchanter, you know, trying to deal 1,000 damage as Janna is a lot. Then you're going to get 153% total efficiency. So you're working really hard for that efficiency in a fight. Okay? If you have Athene's plus Redemption, then that increases the total to 73 gold per 100 because the healing off of Athene's is going to be modified by redemption. So it's going to go up 10%. So that's going to give you a total of 3273 gold value. And the 150% mana regen that you get off of redemption is going to give you 30 more AP, which is a total of 653 gold. So if you get it after you already have redemption, then it's going to be 187% efficient, okay? Under a lot of scenarios. Now remember, with Athenes, this is pre-mitigation damage, so this is 1,000 damage before armor or magic resist, alright? So, you know, if they have 100 magic resist and you hit them with 1,000 damage, you're only going to actually deal 500 damage, but you're still going to get, this item is going to pretend that you did that 1,000 damage, okay? So it's going to give you that in terms of how much healing you're going to get off of these blood charges, okay? So it requires, for this item to really be good, and so even like in a pretty good scenario where it's a second item that you rush, it's still going to be less efficient a lot of the time than something like a locket or an Ardent Sensor, if you're able to trigger Ardent Sensor on multiple people with like Font of Life or Redemption and Locket or anything like that. So it's okay, but you really, if you're going to do this, you need a champion that has multi-target spells, like that can do quite a bit of damage to multiple people, and that also has a spammable heal so that you can constantly discharge these charges. Because if you go over this amount, so if you're playing Zyra or something and you deal like 4,000 damage to the enemy team in one burst, the maximum, this, you shouldn't ever buy this on Zyra, by the way. I'm just using it as an extreme example. If you do like 4,000 damage, you know, in theory, you should be able to charge up to 1,000 heal with that, but it's not going to let you. It's only going to cap it out at a certain amount per level. So if you're level 11, it's going to cap it out at 188. So in other words, if you do a lot of burst damage on a champion, then you're going to be losing gold efficiency on this item. So Athene's Unholy Grail is good in a very long fight, so that you have more chances to damage people and dish out these heals. There's no cooldown on this. So, you know, if you damage somebody and then heal somebody else every, like, 2 seconds, then it's going to keep triggering this, sort of cycling the damage, translating it into a heal, and then distributing it among your team. So that's really what you want, are like long fights where you're on a champion that does AoE damage that also has a heal that you can spam pretty often. So obviously the big choice for this would be Sona. This was a great item on Sona because, you know, her Q hits multiple targets in a fight. You can auto-attack people, her power core does pretty respectable damage, and you have your W, which is a spammable shield heal in a fight, okay? So Sona, you could just be in a fight and just start spamming your Q, spamming your W, healing people up, just channeling through all that mana, and then eventually you would get pretty good efficiency out of this. Another champion that would sometimes get this would be like Lulu, because Lulu's Q can hit multiple targets and do quite a bit of pre-mitigation damage in a fight. Lulu also doesn't scale particularly well with plus healing and shielding, so Redemption, you can still get that on Lulu, and it's still pretty good, but it's not as good as it is on other champions because the only thing that scales with that is her E, which is her shield. So her ultimate does not scale with plus healing and shielding because it's an infusion of health. So Lulu's another potential person who might be interested in Athene's Unholy Grail. Karma might be another one because she does AoE damage with her her Q, potentially. But yeah, in general, it's pretty rare. Like, this item just doesn't stack up very well compared to other items. If you're gonna get it, it's best as like maybe a 4th or a 5th item when you already have a lot of other plus healing and shielding in your kit. So you already have a Redemption and, you know, something like a Mikhail's Crucible, then you might want to get this. I know that this doesn't work well. It disables the Harmony on Mikhail's if you stack them both. So basically, you're not getting the extra healing, but you are getting extra AP off of it because Mikhail's has 100% mana regen. Or, yeah, 100% mana regen, so that would give you an extra 20 AP. So you're basically trading out your health regen for an extra 20 AP, which is a pretty good trade later on in the game, depending on the champion. Valuation-wise, it's a decent trade. Okay, so it's an okay item, but it's really pretty niche. It's only on a few specific champions where it's going to be efficient, and it just doesn't have the same kind of, like, team-wide impact as something like a Locket of the Iron Solari or Redemption, and then arguably it's not going to have as much of an impact as well as something like Ardent Censer or Mikhail's. So if you just basically want single item, like a scenario where you would get this might be where you'd get Redemption, Ardent Censer, and then you're like, okay, my team's just not team fighting at all. You know, we're running a 1-3-1 comp where we have 2 split pushers, and we're just trying to avoid team fights. So I don't want Locket. They don't have a lot of CC. You know, they've got champions on their team like, you know, Fiora, Zed, and just a couple other champions that don't have a lot of CC. Then you might say, I just want higher single target healing with a sprinkle of extra damage. So I'm going to get Athene's Unholy Grail. So basically, if they don't have CC, if you're not team fighting, you've already bought Redemption, you've already bought Ardent Censer, and you want one extra item, then that's when Athene's could come into play. Or if you're playing Sona and you want to go for, like, you know, a more offensive build, so you want to go, like, an Ardent Censer plus Athene's, you could do that, and then you do, you know, more damage in the laning phase. You'd have a bit more damage in team fights. But yeah, I wouldn't really get it before 3rd or 4th big item unless you're Sona or Lulu or maybe Karma. Maybe Nami. I mean, Nami doesn't scale that well with plus healing and shielding either. I don't know. I'd have to think about it for Nami. It might be alright on Nami. But, okay, so let's talk about another thing here that gets debated a lot on the channel is, what should you get? Should you get Frostfangs, or should you get, so Remnant of the Watchers, in other words, or should you get Ascended, Eye of the Oasis, formally is what it would be called. So Watcher or Oasis. Alright. As far as Tier 2 gold evaluation, Frostfang's 112% efficient, Targon's is 72% efficient, and it's getting even less efficient on the next patch. They're going to nerf the Targon line. Or Nomad's, which is 49% efficient. And then you're roughly getting, under ideal circumstances, you're getting about 92 gold per minute. Off of Frostfang, you're getting 80 gold with Targon and 80 gold with Nomad's Battalion. At Tier 3, Watcher is 100% efficient, Equinox is 116% efficient, and Oasis is 78% efficient. The gold generation is the same on everything except for Equinox, which gets 1 extra gold charge. So you can hold up to 4 charges for the minion sharing rather than 3 charges. So potentially that could be a bit more efficiency, but it's no more maximum gold if you're using total efficiency. But it gives you a little more wiggle room to not have to hit an extra minion every 30 seconds. Gives you an extra 30 seconds of wiggle room. Okay, so the strengths of these, Eye of the Watchers, great stats, great for laning, really bad gold generation late. Equinox, great stats, pretty good laning, pretty good gold generation late. And then Ascendant is pretty trash stats, pretty trash laning phase, and then great gold efficiency late. Okay, so let's delve into this a little bit more. So with Frostfang itself, that is 112% gold efficient. %, gold efficient on the baseline stats. So that's good. When you get it, this is going to be the most impactful of the gold items, like right away in the laning phase that you can get, okay? It's got 20 ability power, which is great. It's got 10% cooldown reduction. It's got some base mana regen. Then in addition, you get the 15 gold. You get Bandit, which all of them have Bandit. And you get 18 bonus magic damage on hit whenever you get that gold out. So when you're landing those auto attacks, they're going to hit just a little bit harder as well, which is nice. So that helps out with harassment. So if you complete it at 7 minutes... you're going to have 102 gold efficiency per minute. Okay? Now, it's only in the laning phase. At 17 minutes, so I say that's only in the laning phase because later on in the game, you're not going to be able to walk up. So if you get this on Janna, for example, this is a very common debate. And I'll just use Janna as the example. Should you get Frostfang? Should you get Nomad on Janna? A lot of people will get Frostfang at the Challenger level because you have a much higher laning phase. A much stronger laning phase. We'll talk about here in a second why that matters. But basically, you know, once you're outside the laning phase, you can't just walk up and auto attack somebody as Janna, right, at 20 minutes into the game because they could kill you, right? If you try to walk up and auto attack Draven, once he has his, you know, Death's Dance or Bloodthirst or Infinity Edge or whatever, he's going to chunk you for like half of your life with an auto attack. So it makes it really hard to proc this on a lot of enchanters later on because you can't just walk up and auto attack people. And a lot of enchanters don't have really long range. So it's not like a Zyra where you can, you know, spawn a Q plant if you want to, and then that plant can attack them for an extra 600 range, so you can just, you know, get some procs of this pretty easily. Usually your ranges are pretty low. It's like 800 or less, and that's just too dangerous to go up and use abilities to try to proc this. So what that means is you're just kind of running around at full 3 charges a lot of the time. Unless a team fight breaks out, or unless you just take one shot at the enemy support while they're clearing a ward or something, you just hit them with one auto attack, you know, you're not going to be proccing this very often. So it's very, very inefficient outside of the laning phase, Frostfang. You're just running around at, you know, full charges most of the time. So this is really generous, but I said, okay, what if you get 2 procs per minute? Okay, at 17 minutes plus. So, and this is really whenever the lane breaks. So I said 17 minutes, but a lot of lanes break even earlier than that. I was just doing 10 minutes just for an easy comparison here. But, you know, a lot of lanes might break at like 10 or 12 minutes, depending on what's going on. You know, if there's a really strong push lane, you know, if you're running Janna, Caitlyn, you might break the lane in 8 minutes. You know, 8 to 10 minutes, especially if your jungler comes down, gets a successful gank. And why that's significant, once again, is when you break the lane, that means you're not going to be able to walk up and auto-attack people again. Sometimes that can happen even before you break the lane. So if you're against, like, a Leona and a Draven, and you're running Janna, Ezreal, you're not going to be able to safely walk up and auto-attack them that much in the lane, right? Because they can just kill you. If Leona ever lands an E on you, you're in big trouble. So sometimes this is a problem even before the lane breaks, where you just can't safely walk up and harass somebody. So when you're choosing to get Frost or Nomad, you need to think to yourself, how often am I going to be able to go up and harass them? And am I going to have enough impact in the laning phase off of this harassment in order to justify the lost income that I'm going to have outside of the laning phase? So just for simple math, I just assumed you get 42 gold per minute because you might get 2 procs of Frost outside of the laning phase or in a dangerous situation. So you might auto attack people like twice per minute or something. Once again, not in team fights. In team fights, you're going to be able to get all these procs off. So 2 procs is probably fair, because that probably assumes maybe there's a team fight every, you know, couple of minutes or something, every minute or 2. So 2 procs is pretty fair. Now Nomad, on the other hand, if we're looking at this, that's only 537 gold efficiency, 63%. They are adding 10 movement speed to this in patch 8.4. At least that's what's in the patch notes. So I went ahead and built that in there for 120 gold. If they don't add it, the calculations are still going to be similar. It's going to take like 1 extra minute or something. It's going to be 11.3 minutes instead of 10. But basically how this works, you complete it at 7 minutes, you're going to get 92 gold per minute is what I figured out. So that's 2 gold coins on average per minute. That means you're going to be seeing 2 minion waves. Each one of them is going to drop 1 gold coin somewhere in there. You know, if you get kills or assists, that's going to give you additional gold coins. So I'm just saying 2 gold coins per minute, which is pretty reasonable. And that kind of mirrors the 2 procs you're going to get here. Okay, so that means that, but you're going to get this the entire game, because you're going to be able to walk up and your team's going to be clearing minion waves, and you're just naturally going to get a lot of coins as the game goes on. It's much easier to pick up coins than it is to auto-attack the enemy to get the Frostfang procs, okay? So this is still going to be pretty consistent throughout the entire game, whereas this is very limited. The maximum gold comes very early in the game, okay, and then falls off very steeply in some matchups, and certainly when the lanes break. Okay, so after 17 minutes, or whenever lanes break, whenever you can no longer safely farm with Frostfang, you're going to be getting 50 gold per minute over Frostfang, okay? So if we take that original assumption of this gold efficiency, 952, we get 10 minutes of 102, or whatever. How did I even get to that? You get a 100 gold advantage. Okay, so this is 92 gold per minute. This is 102 gold per minute. So that means you're getting 10 extra gold per minute off of Frostfang under ideal circumstances in the lane. So just using these baseline assumptions that I have here, you're going to be getting an extra 10 gold per minute. So 10 minutes of laning is what I'm saying. Once again, that's probably a really generous number. But 10 minutes of laning would mean you would get an extra 100 gold. So that's where I get the 952. We take it to 1052. This, because you're going to have an extra bonus 100 gold efficiency off of that over those 10 minutes. Then we're saying, okay, 537 gold was the baseline for Nomad. So we say this is what Frostfang was worth in the first 10 minutes. Then 537. And now you're getting an extra 50 gold per minute. All right. You're getting an extra 50 gold. So you're getting 92 gold per minute here. This is 42, so that's plus 50 per minute that you're getting. So it's 515 remaining is the gap between this number. So 515 between the 1052. So it's 515 divided by 50. So to close that gap between what this is worth and what Frostfang is worth for the first 10 minutes of the laning phase, it's going to be an additional 10.3 minutes. Okay, if the game goes longer than 10.3 minutes, then Nomad is going to be much, much more gold efficient, and it's going to be a better buy. Okay? So, in this scenario, that's 27 minutes. So, if you get it at 7 minutes, if you complete the quest, people stay in the laning phase until 17 minutes, and then once you get to 27 minutes, then Nomad is a better buy. Okay? So that's what it comes down to. Nomad becomes more efficient than Frost 10 minutes after lanes break. Now, once again, this can happen much earlier. If lanes break at 10 minutes, then we're going to start the countdown. So then it's by 20 minutes, like 20.1 minutes. And then the efficiency is even less here. So it's probably closer to like 19 minutes. So if lanes break, if you both complete your item and lanes break at like 10 minutes, then around roughly 20 minutes or so, the Nomad is going to become much more efficient than Frostfang is. And if you're wondering, well, what if I complete Frostfang? What if I go for Eye of the Watchers? Then it's even worse for you. Because if we look at, if you complete Remnant of the Watchers here, it's actually only 90% gold efficiency in terms of the stats. So you're actually losing gold efficiency if you do that. If you complete Remnant of the Ascendant, then you're actually gaining 116% efficiency. So it's even more efficient. Okay, so then if you're just rushing to the tier 4, or the tier 3 rather, the forward item, then these numbers even more heavily favor Ascended over Watchers. Okay, so I'm just using the tier 2, assuming you don't upgrade it. If you upgrade it, it's far, far better for Ascended than it is for Watchers. Okay, because the efficiency. Okay, so the one sort of wild card here, and this is difficult to quantify somewhat, but if you're able to get an advantage in lane, every 2.5 CS is 1 extra minute of Frostfang power. Because I'm assuming that a CS, a creep score, a minion, is worth about 20 gold each on average, just for kind of an easy number there, okay? So 2.5 of those makes up for this 50 gold deficit you're going to be getting every minute that you have Frost. And so what that means is, if you're able to get something like an extra 25 CS advantage. So let's say you got Frostfang, and because of that Frostfang, because of this extra damage it gives you in lane with the AP and the on-hit damage, let's say that you're able to really pressure the enemy hard, and your ally is up 25 CS. That's going to give you an extra 10 minutes. So if the lanes break at 10 minutes, and Nomad is going to overtake Frost in terms of gold efficiency at 20 minutes, if you have a 25 CS advantage for your AD carry, then that would push it back to 30 minutes when Nomad starts taking over. Because you've denied the enemy 50 gold per minute for every 2.5 CS that you deny them. Okay? So, example, Frost is greater than Nomad if you are, plus 10 CS at 25 minutes. Okay, so if you're able to gain that advantage early, then it's worth it. If you don't gain an advantage, it is not worth it. So in a standard scenario, so with Janna, for example, and I use Janna a lot here, let's say that you're playing Janna, and you're playing against something that you just can't pressure out that hard. Let's say that you're playing against Leona Draven is a great example. You're not going to be able to pressure them most of the time if you're Janna, because it's too dangerous. So not only are you not going to get the maximum Frost stacks in terms of efficiency, let's say they break your lane, if it's Janna Ezreal, let's say they break your lane at 10 minutes, you didn't pressure anything. Draven's probably going to be up in terms of CS, so you're not going to get any kind of advantage there. This is going to be much less efficient than I talked about, and basically Nomad, probably around 15 minutes, maybe even earlier than that, is going to become a much more efficient buy. Not to mention Nomad, you're probably going to complete your quest first a lot of the time. You're going to get to that 500 gold first, which means you get your wards faster. And so that efficiency starts ticking in as well. So there's a lot of factors to consider, but the general gist here is can you harass with this champion enough to deny a substantial amount of CS in lane if you have Frostfang? That's what it comes down to. If the answer is yes, get Frostfang. So get Frostfang on something like Lulu, Nami, Sona, Zyra, champions that have really good harass early that are going to take big advantage of this. On a champion like Janna that has garbage harass, even if you max W, she's not going to keep up with a lot of these other harass champions. You should probably get Nomad. Okay? Now you might say, but this challenger gets fraud. The reason is the challenger games end faster because they know how to close out their leads. And you're going to have an AD carry that's going to help you harass. And they're going to understand matchups and pick things that are appropriate. Okay? So people are not going to pick Janna unless they have a very heavy push lane. Right? So they're, you know, a lot of challengers, unless they're like one-trick Jannas, they're only going to pick Janna if you have something like a Caitlyn in your lane and you're going for a really fast push lane. And in a push lane, you're going to be lane dominant and you're going to be getting a lot of these. So that's going to allow you to get more of these frost stacks. Also, the frost works against towers. So if you're really trying to push towers, that extra 18 on-hit damage to towers is very nice. Okay, so it does help you push faster. If you have Watchers, it gives you more power in the early game. So if you're running an early game comp, like a Caitlyn, you know, Tower Siege Snowball comp, then it's going to be really good, and that's when you'd want Watchers. If you're going to be, you know, behind in a lane, if you're picking Janna into with Ezreal, like I said, and you're against Draven Leona or some other game or some other composition that's really strong early, it's not in your interest to get Frost because you're going to lose that lane most likely. You're not going to be able to harass enough to make it worth the while. And Nomad is going to be a much better buy for a longer game where you're picking Janna for the mid-game domination. Okay? Boom. There's that. Okay, so I've got it out there. So now anyone asks me, why am I choosing Nomad in this lane over Frost? I'm going to reference this section. It's going to be there. Hopefully people understand it. Okay. So the final thing, and I don't want this to go too long. It's already gone longer than I thought it would. I swear I tried to make this a shorter video. Just kind of the TLDR here, scenarios for different items. Redemption, almost always the best item on most enchanters. Recap, very good gold efficient and very good gold efficiency in most scenarios. 5,500 range. It's a giant sphere of influence. It has a wonderful build path. Because you get mana regen, you get health regen early. That's great for sustaining in lane. The extra mana regen is huge, especially a lot of the enchanters are mana hogs. When you think about Sona, Nami, Karma, a lot of these champions want a lot of mana early on. So that helps them out a ton. And then it has great synergy with every other enchanter item. Like everyone that you're going to get, redemption helps them because of the stat. So with Locket, it helps because you get health and you get plus healing and shielding. So that helps the Locket. With Athene's Unholy Grail, it has a ton of mana regen on it. So it has 150% mana regen. That's going to give you, 30 extra AP, I believe. So that's really good. When you think about Mikhail's Crucible, then you're going to get that 20% extra healing and shielding off of Mikhail's, and that scales really well with Redemption because it gets 3 times the value on the Redemption active. So it's, and with, I guess it doesn't have like super synergy with Ardent Sensor. It's pretty good with Ardent because the plus healing and shielding off of Ardent affects Redemption. So there's not like an insane synergy there, but it's still pretty good with it, right? So with 3 of them, it has really, really good explicit synergy. And with Ardent, it's still pretty good. Okay, so they work well together. Okay, Locket of the Iron Solari, you would get this because this is a team fight domination build. You really want to win 5v5 fights, and you think your team's going to be fighting a lot of 5v5 fights, okay? So you have great team defense with this plus redemption. So like I said before, you drop the redemption, you lock it, it's basically going to make your team invulnerable for a lot of the time. So you're almost always going to win the fight if you have those 2 items, and the enemy doesn't. So it's a great 1-2 punch. The plus healing and shielding scales really well off of redemption on Locket. I just talked about that. It's very good versus long cooldown assassins like Zed, Talon, Rengar. So you just need that shield just to keep someone alive. And then you could turn it around because they're going to be out of gas. Because sometimes those champions have to kill someone immediately or they're pretty worthless. So Locket is very good versus that. The problem is, and the reason you don't want to rush this first most of the time, is it has very limited scaling with other items. It doesn't have any plus healing and shielding. It doesn't have any mana regen on it. It just doesn't have anything that plays well with other items. So it's a good finisher item It scales really well off of health. It scales really well off of plus healing and shielding, but it doesn't give anything back. It's a one-way relationship here, right? So it is buffed by other things, but it does not buff other things. Okay, so that's what makes it a good supplemental item. So not a core item, not something you get every time, not something you rush, but it's a very good supplemental item in certain situations. Okay, Miguel's, you get this to mitigate very dangerous CCs. That's the main reason you would get Miguel's. Okay, so they have something like a Sejuani, an Ashe, a Thresh, a Leona. Just something that's a lot of crowd control that's very dangerous. Sometimes even Varus, like a Varus ult. Okay, so it scales very well with Redemption also. And it scales pretty well with Locket. So that's a very good second or third item. When you go like Redemption, Mikael's, Locket. That's a pretty good three item power spike. So Redemption first, then you can choose whether you want Mikael's or Locket, depending on the situation. But those three work very well together. Ardent Sensor is a basically a win more type of item most of the time. So it's great with Font of Life. I talked about that before. Anything that has AoE healing. So it's really good if you already have Redemption or if you have Locket because it can trigger on everybody. It's good with champions that have nice like point-click slows. Like Janna or like Lulu with her Q. It's not a point click, I guess, but it's pretty easy to hit with her Q. So it's really good on those types of champions. It's really good if your AD carry is an on-hit champion, so a Ginsu's or a Hurricane user, or both a lot of times. Or if they have abilities that hit multiple targets, like a Twitch Ultimate, then it's going to be really good. It's really good scaling with other plus attack speed champions, so it's good with Lulu. Particularly good with Lulu because Lulu's Whimsy increases the attack speed. So not only can Lulu trigger it with her shield, but she can also increase the attack speed to mean that on hit is actually more valuable. Lulu in general is very good with plus attack speed champions because she's good with Ardent. She increases the attack speed with Whimsy, and when she puts picks on them with her E, then Pix scales according to their attack speed. So the more they attack, the more damage Pix is going to do. So Lulu's just great with things like Twitch, Kog'Maw, Kalista. Okay? Don't forget this is also good on things like Shyvana, like Yasuo, Riven, Master Yi. If you have like 3 champions on your team that benefit very heavily from on hit, then that's a pretty good buy. Just keep in mind, and it has really nice base stats. Just remember, some of those stats aren't as good early game because it has no health regen, it has very low mana regen, and it has no defensive stats. So it has no armor, has no magic resist, and it has no health. So Mikael's has magic resist, Locket has armor and magic resist, and Redemption has health. So all of these items give you some extra survivability. Ardent does not, unless you're including the 8% move speed of survivability, which is sort of true, but not as empirically true as those other items. And then finally, we have Athene's Unholy Grail. It's a decent hybrid item, pretty much niche for certain champions that can do good area of effect damage and also have a spammable shield or heal. So something like a Sona, Lulu, or a Karma are pretty good with this. So mostly Sona. So it's decent on support items with those reasons. It's a pretty good third item if you go Redemption plus Mikael's in the scenario that I described, where you're not going to be team fighting much, so Locket has less value, and you may not want to go Ardent. Or you could get it with Ardent, you know, if they don't have a lot of CC, and so you don't think you need Mikael's, you're not going to be team fighting a lot, so you don't need Locket, then it could be a third item with Redemption plus Ardent, I think would make a bit more sense there. Okay, so bigger sort of single target buff, single target AP, things like that. So has very limited scaling with other items though. All right, so once again, kind of like Locket, you know, it doesn't have plus healing or shielding on it, doesn't give health that scales with anything else, so it's pretty much just a one-way street. It scales nice with plus healing and shielding, but that's about it. Okay, well, I hope this helps you kind of understand and figure out some of these different Enchanter support items. I'm going to make a separate video, like I said, for the new AP items and for the tank items. I'll try to do them a bit faster. I'm going to aim for like 45 minutes to an hour on the next couple of items, or on the next couple of guides, but, you know, always want to be as in-depth as possible. And I know that there was really important stuff here, like plus healing and shielding, and then just really understanding how to evaluate these things, and especially comparing Eye of the Watchers versus Eye of the Oasis, because I get asked that all the time, especially about Janna and about Rakan. And so hopefully this kind of lays it out for you why you should choose one item or the other. And, you know, the big takeaway here is there is nothing that you should always do, with the exception of maybe Redemption. a lot of it's very flexible, and it depends on the champion, it depends on the game state, so you need to make sure that you're paying attention and really thinking carefully about the items that you're selecting as the game unfolds and evolves. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.